Okay, so I'm going to start with this dashboard, which we were looking at. Nothing's really changed here. As I went through, there are some bar charts and heat maps and trend lines and so forth, and some numbers. And what I want to do is point RelayiQ at this dashboard so that we can begin to monitor various metrics using different detection algorithms. So in order to do that, there are two ways that we can hook into this dashboard. One is by dropping our extension. We have an extension in the Tableau Marketplace onto this dashboard. It displays itself as a button. Or if you don't want a button sitting on your dashboard, you can grab the URL for the dashboard, come over to our application and click on Create a Template. And you would just paste the URL in here, and it would launch a workflow that I'm about to get into now. So rather than starting one from scratch, I'm going to open one up that I've already built so you don't have to sit and watch me type and point and click too much. So the first thing that happens when you connect into a dashboard is it tells the user, and I'm playing the role of an analyst right now, who would be defining the model for detecting the outlier and giving the prescriptions and setting up the notifications. The first thing it does is it tells me what metrics it found in that dashboard. So it's giving me this list here to say that there's this profit ratio sheet, and on there's a profit ratio metric and sales and profit sheet with sales and the profit metric in, and so forth and so on. So what I had already set up was this template that is looking at the total sales, and that is that big number right here. So if I wanted to set up a very simple outlier detection mechanism against this, for example, I want to compare it to some constant value, I can select that as my model. If I want to drop in some kind of dimension, maybe I'll just look at the label total sales, since that number is not really sliced by anything. I can then also say I want to know maybe when this is, say, between two numbers. So I'm going to say between I'll do 1.5 million and 1.8 million. Oops, that's 18 million. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, it drew this static band here for me between 1.5 and 1.8 million. And since my actual value, the sales of 2.29, is not within that range, it's showing up as blue. If I were to extend this to 2.8, and I'm saying I want to get notified when I'm between that range, you can see now it's turned orange, indicating that I am between this range that I've defined here. Now, this is really just a tool for the analyst to visually see what these thresholds mean and how they play out. I'll show in a moment how we can really start to customize this for individual recipients once the analyst is done creating this template. Another model that we can look at is the mean and standard deviation. So if I look at, say, profit ratio here, and I want to look at profit ratio, I'm sorry, that's not the one I wanted. No, that is it. I'm going to look at it by state. I think this is the right one. And I'm going to make this the X bar, which is the mean and standard deviation. You can see now that rather than me as the analyst telling it what my static threshold should be, looking at the data, the model has determined what those outliers are. And so in this case, I'm saying if it's between minus and positive 1.5 standard deviations around the mean, then consider it an outlier. So you can see that this little markup here is okay because it's outside that range, not between, and as well as those negative ones. Now I could flip this and say I'm more interested in when it's outside and not within, meaning that there's some numbers on the fringes, and you can see the colors flipped. So a lot of flexibility of how you define your ranges. Maybe you're greater than, less than, inside, outside, etc. And then the last model that I wanted to show here was the time series. So if I look at my sales trend, and that's my metric, and then I select my order date as my dimension, and what the tool does is it detects that that is indeed a time series, and it flips the visualization over to a line chart from a bar chart. And it held on to my mean and standard deviation model here. So you can see that it's picked up with the mean and standard deviation, and it's identifying those outliers nicely. But as I was saying earlier, I know that there's seasonality and trend here. So the mean and standard deviation model is not the best. So I want to flip this over to be a time series that lets me enter in the number of periods in a season if I know them. If not, I don't need to enter them. And what's going on right now is it's doing its best to fit that data stream to an ARIMA model. Just for demonstration, it's highlighting for me these data points that fell outside of the predicted range. But in practice, when I actually am checking these values on an ongoing basis, I'm really only interested in the most recent one. In this case, my predicted value, which is the gray band, falls on either side of my actual, so I wouldn't necessarily trigger this to be an outlier. If I wanted to flip this around and say, tell me when I'm in between that prediction range, then you'll see the colors change. But the point here is that we're really only looking at the most recent data point, because that's what we're interested in. We don't want to know if something already happened. We want to know what the most recent activity is and whether it's out of norm. So those are three models I wanted to show in our tool. Now I'll just quickly kind of wrap up with the rest of the tool and in how you can take these models and start to monitor them on an ongoing basis. So if I've defined my model here, I can then go over to prescribe. And this is where I can really construct a message that would go out to non-technical users. They don't know what an ARIMA is. They don't know about outlier detection. They just want to know, as Brian said at the top of the call, when something went wrong so that they can go take an action. So what we provide here is this rich text editor that allows for different types of formatting. We can drop in different message variables that personalize the notification to the person receiving it. For example, their name, maybe putting in the value of a filter that's specific to them, that is selected for them. You can put in links to other applications, maybe a link to a calendar, a request to go review a dashboard. The point is here, these are prescriptions or actions that we're recommending to this recipient. Again, as the analyst, I would try to define these in a way that is really going to drive action and business impact. I might want to work with a business manager to understand what the relevant actions are when certain situations occur in the dashboard that I'm monitoring, so that I can prescribe these things in an appropriate way to these end users and end recipients. You can also drop in things like dashboard images, and we also have things like dashboard recommendations. So if there are other dashboards within the Tableau server environment that are similar to the one we're monitoring, we can even recommend those to the end users as well. The next step is where we select who should be receiving this notification based off of the model and the criteria we've defined. So what we have here is the ability to select the recipients. What's showing here is a list of users in this system, and I have the ability to go pick the ones that I want to send this to, along with the channels that I'd like them to receive it in. We have three default channels, and I'll talk about one additional one that we're building out now. It's email, text, and Slack. So I can pick amongst those. And as you can see, when I select them, it's adding the recipients to this list. I can take away recipients if I wish. And then this is where the real fun comes. I can really start to customize the criteria around what each of these recipients will get and what will trigger their notifications. Now, in this case, I'm using that ARIMA model with a 95% prediction confidence range. Perhaps somebody wanted to shrink that range a little and be a little more sensitive to variations in the data. Maybe Jason's that way. But Brian's the opposite. He doesn't want to hear about it so much, only if there's a really extreme case. So that is one mechanism. If you think back to the approach where we might have be using the constant model from the rules-based approaches, maybe each one of these people has a different quota, and we want to key in the different quotas for each person, so that the notification's only triggering when their specific quota is exceeded versus some generic quota across everyone. Likewise, we have the ability here to add in filters. So for example, if there's a particular field, perhaps it's a region, and I want to put in a default value of West here, I can put that, but then really start to customize for each person so that they get the filters applied to the dashboard that are relevant to them. Very easy to do. No need for custom views for every single person. We take care of all that on our end, and if we wanted to do East and West here, we can do that as well. So that's about it in terms of setting up the notification template. I can just click Save here. I can also give it a title and a description. So I might say this is a notification for when seasonal trends for sales are not realized. Hit save. And what this now does is it not only subscribes all of these recipients to this notification template, but it also creates this card on the subscriptions page that allows end users to come into our platform and subscribe to it on their own. So you can see that I just created this app here that is around a sales alert, and I have the misspelling here, but that's okay, to look at when it's not realized. If I were to click on this now as an end user, I can subscribe myself to this. I can add and remove channels. I can change filters and so forth. So I'm customizing it for myself as opposed to just relying on the analyst to do that for me. So that is kind of a quick beginning to end. Brian, I'm sure I forgot some things. So do you have other things you wanted me to point to?
Sure. I just go to the end user view and walk through some notification examples.
Yep.
And also I think the action board piece might be also interesting for our participants.
Okay. All right. Good, very good point. Thank you. Probably the most important thing. So, so if we think about the end user perspective, what are they seeing? What are they receiving besides the screen I was just on? This is an example of an alert or a notification that was sent out to an end user based off of the template that I just built. So you can see it added in this rich text formatting with the colors and the emojis and put my name in. It knew that I was interested in the West region, so it placed that value in there. One thing I didn't touch on is you can also pull values from the dashboard itself and display them in line in the message text as opposed to kind of being locked up in the dashboard. We can also list in the body of the email or message what the outliers are. So for example, if I was monitoring, say this bar chart here, and I wanted to know which states were outliers, we can embed that into the message as well. So in this case, conceivably, it might say Montana is an outlier, or Montana and Washington. You can see that these, it held on to the rich text formatting with the bulleted items. It provided this link here to Salesforce, and as well as to maybe my manager's calendar if I wanted to make an appointment. So really the sky's the limit here in terms of how you want to drive action and where you want to take people once they receive this notification. And of course, we can't forget about Tableau and the fact that these recipients might want to go back into Tableau and take a deeper look. So when they click on this image here, we'll take them back into Tableau. It opens up that dashboard. And in fact, it will pre-filter it for them based off of the filter that's been applied for their subscription, whether they've selected it or it's been selected on their behalf. And so that is what a typical email notification looks like. I'll flip over to Slack here, and let me see if I can find a good one. Sorry.
So the good news is we use this product ourselves.
Yes.
So it's actually showing we get ourselves notified when a new user gets a new account or things are happening in our business. So that's a real life use of our software that he's kind of walking you through. So
yeah,
Slack is similar to email, a little less formatting because Slack has limitations, but similar concept.
So as you can see, the messages come across, and there's a picture of the, I'm not going to click on that one, but a picture of the dashboard here that can be expanded if necessary. And then the last one I'll show is something new we're working on, which is writing into Trello. So if you use Trello for managing your tasks or the actions that you need to take, and maybe you have a board for that, and you have all these lists where there are particular items or to-dos under each list, what we can do is send the notification right into your to-do list. So here's an example of how the alert got triggered, and it sent this notification into this Trello card with the same message that we were looking at earlier. Emojis came over, thankfully. There's a picture of the dashboard if you want it here. And again, the links out to these third-party applications. But the really neat thing here now with Trello is I can say, if there's some action that I need to take that's kind of embedded into this message, I can now move it through my process of getting my work done. So if this is now in progress, I can drag this whole card over to in progress, and then maybe awaiting reply, and so forth and so on. So I can kind of check those boxes and feel satisfied that I'm moving these things along. One last piece, just wanted to show you to kind of close the loop. If I am receiving this notification and I do maybe want to change something about my subscription, I can click on this manage link here. It will take me back into the application, this similar screen that we were looking at earlier, where I can, again, add and remove channels, change filters, thresholds, frequencies, etc. So I can perform some self-service on my own, but in a very, very simple and limited way.
And Anthony, there was a question about this topic, and I'll tell my personal story. Again, we use our product ourselves to manage our day-to-day activities. And the first day Anthony set up a notification around new users, he set up for me to get it in email every hour, and I wanted it in Slack every day. So I called Anthony and said, please change my channel frequency. He said, no, go do it yourself. So we enable this really simple self-service on users to take some control and not bother the analyst with easy questions. And it's pretty effective. Anthony, anything else you wanted to highlight in your section?
No, that is it. So let me stop sharing, if that's okay.
Sure.
Maybe we can finish up the presentation.
Yep, let me share my screen for time, and then we'll just bring it to a close. So one thing Anthony did not mention is to get information out of a Tableau dashboard through our notification engine. That recipient does not have to be a Tableau licensed user. They only have to be if they want to take advantage and go back into Tableau to go deeper. The other thing we could not show you in a demo is third-party machine-to-machine integration, things like Calibra or Freshdesk, that you could launch an automatic notification through an API to a machine for an automated action. We only showed you actions to a person in Slack, email, Trello, or text. We also, again, can do machine-to-machine integration as well, do custom APIs.
And so on the flip side of that, Brian, sorry to interrupt, is what we showed is that the trigger point coming from, or the trigger mechanism, not only coming from the outlier detection model that's selected, but also based off of our scheduler. So I think you may have seen that I could schedule to check the metric on a weekly or daily or hourly basis. We also have the ability to have that trigger come from outside, meaning if you have a workflow that runs every Sunday, but it might end at different times, you don't want to tie yourself to our schedule, because what if that workflow goes long and it misses the schedule that's been put on our end? So there is this ability to call out to our API to initiate the workflow on our end, rather than making it based off of our own scheduler.
So what Anthony described, and I'll get the questions in a second, is really our automation platform. Again, we can detect automatically outliers, again, through an API call to launch detection or through a scheduler, and a prescription in the message body, and then notify any person or machine of customized actions.